Hello my friends and welcome back to my kitchen. Today we're making braised beef with vegetables, all in one skillet, so stay to the end. We start with a pour of olive oil. Now a knob of butter goes in, and I let it melt down evenly across the pan. Butter brings the flavor, and the olive oil keeps it from burning, so the two of them always work together here. I'm taking the beef, patting away the moisture with a paper towel, and trimming off the silvery veins. Do take your time with this trimming, because those tough streaks never soften, not even after a long braise, and one chewy bite can undo all the work the rest of the dish did. So a few careful minutes with the knife right now buys you real tenderness at the table later. Now I'm cutting the beef into cubes, keeping them close to the same size so they cook at one even pace. There's something honest about this kind of quiet work. And my mother always used to say that you can tell exactly how a dinner will turn out just by how patiently the meat was cut for it. And after all of my years spent at the cutting board, I would say she had a very good point. With my kitchen tongs, I'm laying the beef cubes into the skillet one by one, giving each piece its own little spot of hot pan to work with, because crowded meat only steams instead of browning, and browning is exactly where the flavor of this whole dish begins its journey. A sprinkle of Himalayan salt goes over all of the beef, right there in the pan, so the seasoning settles into the meat while that very first crust is forming underneath it in the heat. Now I'm grinding black peppercorns over the meat and covering the skillet with a mesh screen, which lets the steam out while keeping the stovetop clean at the same time. The beef will fry for about 15 minutes. Time to lift the screen and turn the beef over with the tongs, piece by piece, so the second side gets exactly the same chance as the first one did. Just look at that color and listen to that steady sizzle, because that sound is the pan's own way of telling you that everything in there is going exactly the way it should. And a little more Himalayan salt goes right over the freshly turned beef sizzling away in the pan. And then some freshly ground black pepper goes over the meat as well. And the mesh screen goes right back on top of the skillet while the second side takes its turn to brown. The beef is browned all over, so I'm lifting the cubes out of the skillet and setting them aside for now. They'll return a little later on to braise slowly until tender, once the vegetables have built a proper home for them in the pan. So this is just a short goodbye and not a farewell. Now I'm slicing an onion into thin half rings. The onion always goes in first among the vegetables because it needs the most time of them all. And those half rings will slowly soften into sweet ribbons that thread themselves through the whole dish by the end. So every single forkful gets a little bit of that quiet sweetness without anyone at the table ever once thinking about the onion at all. The onion goes into the skillet, straight into all those browned bits the beef left behind, and I stir it through. As it softens, it lifts all of that browned flavor up off the bottom of the pan and keeps it right in the dish, exactly where it belongs. From here, the vegetables will take about 10 minutes altogether, so there's truly no rush at all. Just steady heat and a little stir every now and then. Now I'm cutting celery into medium pieces, on an angle. Be honest with me in the comments. Is your family team celery, or did you have to sneak it into dinners the way I did for years with my husband? He swore up and down that he hated it, right until the day he cleaned his whole plate and asked me for seconds, never once suspecting a thing. I'd love to hear who in your house had to be outsmarted at the table, and which vegetable it was, so tell me your stories down below. The celery goes into the skillet, and I stir it through. Cutting it on an angle isn't just for looks, since the slanted cut opens up much more of the stalk to the heat, so it cooks evenly all the way through while still keeping a little of its pleasant bite. Now I'm cutting a carrot into thin matchsticks, working my way down the whole of it. Carrot is the quiet workhorse of a braise like this one, because its natural sweetness balances out the salty soy and the rich beef further down the road. And cut this thin, it surrenders itself completely into the sauce, instead of sitting there in hard, stubborn chunks, which is exactly the fate we want for it in this particular dish. The carrot matchsticks join the rest of the vegetables in the skillet, and I stir everything together well. Just look at those colors coming together in the pan already. All that bright orange against the softening onion, and we are truly only getting started here. Now I'm slicing a few mushrooms, and just listen to how fresh they sound under the knife. That clean little squeak. Mushrooms bring the deep, earthy note that this whole dish leans on. And if the white ones aren't looking their best at your store this week, cremini will step in beautifully and carry the job just as well. So simply take home whichever ones look the freshest that day. The mushrooms go into the skillet, and I stir them right through the vegetables. They'll shrink down quite a bit as their water cooks away in the heat, and that is exactly the moment when their flavor turns deep and concentrated in the pan. A sprinkle of Himalayan salt goes right over all the vegetables. Now I'm grinding black pepper over the pan and stirring it all the way through, so every single vegetable gets its fair share of the seasoning before the sauce arrives a little later on to tie them all together into one dish. Now a full tablespoon of flour, and I stir it in until it coats all the vegetables in the pan. This one little spoonful is what will thicken our sauce a bit later on, and cooking it into the fat first is exactly what keeps it from ever turning lumpy on us further down the line. In goes a 1/4 cup of soy sauce, and just listen to that lovely hiss as it hits the hot pan. The soy sauce brings both the salt and the deep, savory backbone of this whole dish, all from one small pour straight out of the bottle. Now a cup of beef broth goes in, and I keep stirring as the sauce comes together around the vegetables before my eyes. Watch how it slowly thickens into something glossy that coats every piece in the pan. And that right there is our little spoonful of flour, quietly doing its job. Now the garlic. And today I'm slicing it into rings instead of grating it. Sliced garlic behaves quite differently in a pan because the rings mellow and sweeten as they braise away, giving gentle waves of flavor all through the dish instead of one sharp note. And that is just what a long-cooked dinner like this one wants. All the garlic rings go into the skillet, and I stir them all the way through the sauce, where they will slowly melt down into the braise over time and quietly perfume every last corner of it, from the beef to the very last carrot. Now the browned beef returns to the skillet at last, and I mix it in with the tongs and cover the pan up with the lid. From here, it braises away for about 40 minutes until the beef turns completely tender and soft all the way through. Time to lift the lid at last, and while the beef keeps working away underneath, I'm cutting half a red bell pepper into strips. The peppers go in this late on purpose because they only need a short while in the pan, and that way they keep their bright color and a little of their crunch instead of quietly fading into the sauce like everything else that went into the pan long before them. The red pepper strips go into the skillet, and I stir them all the way through the braise. Now just look at how all that bright red wakes up the whole pan in a single moment, like a fresh coat of paint across the whole dish. Now the same with half a green bell pepper cut into strips. The two peppers taste noticeably different from each other, since the green one is grassier and a touch sharper than its sweet red sister. And using both of them gives the finished dish a fuller flavor along with all of that lovely color. The green pepper strips join the skillet as well, and I stir everything together in the pan once more. Red, green, orange, and all of that glossy brown sauce running underneath it. This pan is truly starting to look like a proper celebration all of its own. Now I'm cutting green onion, coarsely this time, in long pieces. Tell me in the comments, did your family grow green onions on the windowsill in winter the way my grandmother always did? Those little jars of green on the sill were her quiet pride all winter long. And I would truly love to know if your house had them growing too. The chopped green onion goes into the skillet, and I stir it in through the braise, since it needs barely a minute or two in the heat to give the whole finished dish its fresh green lift right at the end. A sprinkle of sesame seeds goes right over the top of everything, and our beef with vegetables is finally ready to serve. With the tongs, I'm lifting the beef and vegetables up onto the warm plate piece by piece, making sure every single color from that pan makes its way safely out onto the dish. Just look at this plate for a moment. Tender beef resting in all that glossy sauce, bright peppers, sesame seeds catching the light, and all of it made in one single skillet. And the first bite, the beef is tender, the sauce is pure comfort. Subscribe, hit like, see you next time!